Hello, namaste. I'm Nishu and you are listening to Gapodiye. At Gapodiye, we believe that stories are not merely meant to entertain us. They help us understand ourselves, our relationships, and the society we live in. Today's story is The Happy Prince, written by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was an Irish writer, poet, and a playwright known for his wit, imagination, and deep understanding of human nature. Although this story was written more than 100 years ago, it continues to speak to readers across generations. We chose this story today because it invites us to think about compassion, privilege, friendship, and our responsibility towards one another. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on a simple question. What does it truly mean to be rich, successful, or happy? With that, let's begin. High above a city stood a magnificent statue. Everyone admired it. The statue was covered with thin leaves of gold. Its eyes were made of shining sapphires, and a large red ruby sparkled on the hilt of its sword. People called it the Happy Prince. Whenever citizens looked up at the statue, they felt proud. How beautiful he is, they would say. How splendid! One evening, a little swallow arrived in the city. Winter was approaching. All his friends had already flown to warmer lands. But the swallow had stayed behind longer than expected, looking for a place to rest. He settled between the feet of the happy prince. This seems comfortable, he thought. But just as he closed his eyes, a drop of water fell on him. Then another. The swallow looked up. The sky was clear. There were no clouds. Where were the drops coming from? Then he noticed something surprising. The happy prince was crying. Tears were running down his golden cheeks. Huh? You are called the happy prince? Said the swallow. Why are you crying? And then the statue replied. When I was alive, I lived inside a palace. I knew nothing of suffering. I saw only comfort and beauty. But now I stand high above the city. I can see everything. I see hunger. I see loneliness. I see children without food. I see people struggling. And my heart is filled with sorrow. The swallow listened quietly. The prince then pointed towards a small house. Inside sat a poor woman working late into the night. Her child was ill and crying with fever. Swallow, said the prince, please take the ruby from my sword and give it to her. The swallow hesitated. He wanted to leave for warmer lands, but he could not ignore the prince's request. So he carried the ruby and placed it beside the woman. And then he returned. The next night, the prince saw another person in need. Then another. Each time he asked the swallow for help. The sapphires from his eyes were given away. The gold covering his body was peeled off and distributed among the poor. Little by little, the magnificent statue lost all its beauty. But as the prince became less beautiful on the outside, he became more beautiful on the inside. And the swallow? Instead of flying away, he chose to stay. Because friendship had become more important than comfort. Day after day, he helped the prince until winter arrived. The cold became unbearable. The swallow grew weaker. And one final time, he flew to the prince. Dear prince, he whispered. He kissed the prince and felt still at his feet. At that very moment, a crack appeared in the prince's leaden heart, not because of the cold, but because he had lost a friend. The next morning, city officials looked at the statue. Without the gold, without the jewels, without its former beauty, it looks useless now, they said, and they ordered it to be taken down. But what they failed to see was that the prince and the swallow had given away everything they possessed. to make someone else's life a little easier. And perhaps that is a different kind of wealth, a deeper kind, a more human kind. And that brings us to the end of today's story. But before we leave, let's return to the question we began with. What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be successful? In today's world, we are constantly encouraged to collect more followers, more possession, more recognition, more achievements. Yet, this story asks us to consider something else. What if true happiness lies not in what we keep, but in what we share? What if friendship is measured not by convenience but by presence? What if the value of our lives is reflected in the kindness we leave behind? That is why we chose the Happy Prince for Gapodiye today. Because even after more than a century, this story reminds us that empathy, compassion, and solidarity remain among the most important human qualities. I am Nishu. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, share it with someone who may need it today. And tell us in the comments what you think makes a person truly rich. Until next time, keep listening, keep imagining, and keep sharing stories. Namaste.